Very nice.
And, like a couple days.
It's a lost art. It's a lost art.
After that, they want you like to walk. Yeah. A little too young. I'm afraid that it's not going to last.
You've been sitting in my chair.
Doesn't mean I want to die earlier.
Yeah, I know. Sometimes I think at the end, if I don't get strong, I put a heating pad on sitting helps, right? Oh. Heating pad helps, yeah.
Yes, I think so.
Raining, huh? Which side?
You're pointing up, right?
No, I made it in just as it started.
Who's out there tonight? It's here.
Have you gone to any of these mass municipal associations? Oh, this is different. This is municipal. Oh, is it? It's how it's done. Oh, really?
Trying to wait for it to come.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
7:32. I just.
We're gonna get some chips, or
All right. Yeah.
I've never been to a casino.
I'll give it to you before you leave.
Never stepped foot.
Last time you will.
Right.
Okay, my mail.
And you leave your ATM card at home.
We have
Okay.
It's late.
Let's start this meeting. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I don't trust myself.
I'd like to remind everyone this is being recorded and also aired live. I'd like to start with condolences to the family of Ivan Wickstrom upon his passing on 17th of March 2019. Mr. Wickstrom served in the United States Marine Corps during the Korean War. I'd also like to pause for a moment of silence. Thank you. We were having printer trouble for our minutes, so we'll have to postpone the approval of the minutes from the previous meeting. And I would like to say something. I'm having back spasms a little bit, so I'm going to sound funky once in a while. Pretty interesting stuff going on with my back right now. So forgive me if I sound more broken than usual. Okay, we have no announcements from the president, no proclamations. Citizens open forum. Anybody would like to step up to the podium, say a word, please state your name, address, and spend a few minutes talking to us.
Will do. Marilee Kenny Hunt, 80 Austin Street, and your town clerk. I have a few things, just 3 things I want to say, so I'll try to say them as quickly as I can. I brought a copy of the sample ballot. Well, this isn't a copy of the sample. This is a copy of the actual absentee ballot for the election. I just want folks in viewer land and who are here to know that it's a 2-sided ballot. You will vote for the charter on the bottom of the second back page. So it says turn it over, but having been one of those people who forgot to turn it over one time to vote for something I was very interested in, I'm trying to remind everybody to do that. The main part of the ballot is the summary of what's being changed in the charter. So that's this entire part and the entire backside. So you might encourage your constituents to get a hold of a ballot. It's online, it's on Facebook, it's posted in various places at the Better Bean, the Juice Mill, the library, here in our office, around town, the senior center. So people might want to look at it ahead of time. It's not just a simple thing to read. Also, for the election, I'm still looking for 4 high schoolers for the afternoon to help me. We're going to be voting in the cafeterias, not in the gymnasium as we usually do. The gym floor has been warped and is unusable. So we'll be voting in the cafeterias. We'll be using the back entrance. I believe they call it it used to be called the Bridgewater, the Bridgewater entrance. There'll be some handicap parking and some guides there and a wheelchair there to help people get in. There'll also be a wheelchair and some guides at the main front entrance, the Rainham entrance. It's kind of a long walk to get down to those cafeterias. So I still need 4 more high schoolers to come volunteer and get community service hours to help us with that. mkhunt@bridgewaterma.org is my email address. The next thing I wanted to talk about is I know you're going to vote on NIPS, unless any of you should be opposed to supporting what's going to be on your agenda as LC. I wanted to point out, this is the only part, here's the other part, they fall all over, but I want to show them on TV. I picked this up in 1 block last week. I'd gone to Bridgewater Print to get the street list approval. I asked them for this bag. And I picked this up when I walked across from Bridgewater Print and Copy and up to, not all the way to Bruno's, to what used to be Bruno's. And this is what I picked up along with that. In that distance, I picked up nothing else but nips. I had to walk by all sorts of trash that was tempting me to pick it up, and I didn't have any place to put it. So please vote in favor of that. Resolution. And then the last thing I wanted to say, you have legislation for action, LA, that originally started out as town clerk evening hours, has now been switched and modified. So I have a few comments on that I would like to make. I'd like to know when the public was ever surveyed about this. Right now, the situation as it's being proposed is that we would be closed every Friday during the summer, July and August, and that we would be open in the evenings on various Tuesdays, the 1st and 3rd or something like that, Tuesdays throughout the year. I want to know if that's what the public actually wants. I will tell you, in our office, we've had an informal survey going on, seeing if anyone is disturbed by the fact that we're not open in the evening. We've received not one complaint about not being open in the evening. We have received many complaints because there is not a drop box for anyone to put things in over the weekend when they come downtown. And Councillor Fitzgibbons came in last night. I had to be here until 8 o'clock for people to register to vote. He and his son came down to visit me and tell me some exciting news. And I was standing in the hall with a package. It was about 7:15, I think. And a man had just come in. The building was open because, of course, I was here. And he said, I have walked around this building twice. I can't find a drop box. I have this manila envelope for the town manager. Where am I supposed to put it? And I said, well, I will take it, and I will take it and put it in the mailbox, which is what I was doing when Councillor Fitzgibbons walked in. Those sort of things happen all the time. When census is being returned, when taxes are being returned, we found a lot of mail at the town hall, at the old town hall, when that box was active. That's no longer active, and we have people complaining almost daily about the fact that there is no place for them to drop off any mail. Almost everything we do is available online. A lot of money has been spent by this town to upgrade all of our technology so that we have many things. The only thing I can think of, the only thing in our office that someone can't do online is complete their marriage intentions, because both of them have to be there. They have to be there in person. They have to swear. If anyone tells me that they can't come in, I always open the office and come in and meet them on a Saturday, a Sunday, an evening, or whenever they need it. So we just simply don't see the complaints. I believe that being open every other Tuesday is going to make confusion for people. Who sits around and thinks, is this the first Tuesday? Is this the second Tuesday? Which Tuesday is this? Can I go down? I also feel that people often take a Friday off. I know when I worked in Boston, that would be the day that we would take off to pick up our laundry, make our dental appointments, make our eye appointments, and do business around town. So being closed on Fridays, I do not feel is a public service. It feels a little so unlike public service. It feels like self-service to me to be closed all day on a Friday, every Friday of the summer. That feels selfish, which is not my personal description of what public service is. So I'd rather make sure that we are serving the public. I'd like to see some attempt made to talk to the public about what they would actually like before we jump in and try to change something. So I think that's most of what I want to say, and I'll let somebody else have a chance to talk. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Marie Fahey, 105 Bayberry Circle in Bridgewater. President Haley, members of the Town Council, Mr. Dutton and Attorney Rollins. I am the current nurse leader for the Bridgewater-Rainham Regional School District. I have been a school nurse leader in Bridgewater and then the Bridgewater-Rainham District for the past 32 years. My two sons went through this district. I've lived here for 39 years, and my three of my grandchildren are now entered in our district schools. I did recently speak at the Budget Subcommittee, the Joint Committee, but I just wanted to reiterate and confirm the data, and I'm sorry if it's a little bit repetitive, that was shared previously by the Superintendent, Mr. Swenson, and School Committee member, Mrs. Holbrook. Over the past several years, we've seen a marked escalation in children diagnosed with mental health issues such as anxiety and depression. Especially this past decade, it's just grown every single year. There are many more psychosocial visits to the health office, resulting in increased referrals to counselors and the school psychologists. This is consistent with other districts across the state and, unfortunately, across the country. Some of today's students are struggling with increased academic pressures at younger ages, also the social pressures that are felt with various forms of social media, Snapchat, Twitter, and some other things that I probably don't even know how to pronounce. We are trying hard to help our students become more resilient and better able to cope with life stressors. Mr. Powers has been leading the district with a team to review and study social emotional learning curriculums that we hope to implement in the fall. We're part of a cohort of districts sharing best practices. I know the budget process is really long and difficult, and you've been at it for a while now. I also know the superintendent has shaved down his list of initial requested positions from 47 down to 18 that he considered essential to meet the needs of our student population. Maintaining a manageable class size allows students to feel more secure and connected to an adult. We know that students need to feel connected to be able to lessen their anxieties. The addition of adjustment counselors are necessary to meet the growing mental health needs of all of our students. All students have very different strengths and abilities. We encourage students to express themselves through drama, art, and music. Currently, there's only one art teacher at our high school. She's phenomenal, but obviously there's a need for more there as well. So my only point is that all of the requested positions have an emotional impact on our students. And I know, looking at the current budget numbers, sadly, most of these positions will not be funded. But I'm respectfully asking you, my town councilors, who work very hard for our town, to carefully consider reviewing and increasing our contribution to the school district's budget proposal by possibly the $220,000 to match the Rainham increased offering. This would greatly help add the most critical positions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Lillian Holbrook, 45 Driftwood Drive. Good evening, President Haley, members of the Town Council, Mr. Dutton, and Attorney Rollins. I'm here tonight not in the capacity of school committee member, but as a resident, taxpayer, and retired teacher. The Bridgewater Rainham Regional School District has been underfunded for many years, which has made it impossible for our district to fund teaching positions in order to lower class sizes, the hiring of school psychologists or adjustment counselors to address the ever-growing social emotional needs of our students, and caseloads in some instances of 380 to 425 students. The hiring of additional teachers for electives in the area of the arts, as well as business and history at the high school level. Updating our textbooks to meet the state-mandated Common Core. The hiring of additional health teachers. The hiring of technology technician. The hiring of a special education / school psychologist. You may ask, how does the lack of funds for the above positions affect our students? Our students miss out on more one-to-one time with the classroom teacher when there is a larger class size. For some of these students, school is their safe place, and this may be the only positive attention they get all day. Additionally, with larger class sizes, teachers are restricted by time to give good, productive feedback to individual students. If a student in a classroom becomes dysregulated, it is the teacher's responsibility to keep that child safe. Without additional support systems in place, the teacher becomes the support system for that student, and the other students miss out on instruction. Students with social emotional needs often feel overwhelmed in academics. For those students, there is comfort in music and art. It has a calming effect on them. Without hiring additional art and music teachers at the high school level, those students have a tendency to become dysregulated. The arts shouldn't be an educational luxury. Since our funding has been cut back, we've had to eliminate the hiring of additional staff for the following elective courses or offerings at the high school: business, history, music, and art. This results in fewer electives being offered to our students. By not having additional health teachers, the district is unable to provide the prevention and intervention programs in the areas of healthy living, substance abuse, and positive lifestyle choices. Without the hiring of a technology technician, the IT manager and 2 IT technicians will have to continue to manage approximately 9,000 end users and devices for approximate workload of 3,000 users per staff member. Without hiring of a special education slash school psychologist position, we are unable to coordinate and provide social, emotional, behavioral coaching and support to staff and students district-wide. This position also included chairing out-of-district team meetings. Your own FY20 budget states one of its goals is to incrementally increase funding in areas where there are sizable service gaps. I can assure you, the regional school district is experiencing a sizable service gap. The FY20 budget also states the quality of education Bridgewater provides is very directly related to the long-term economic success of the town. I could not agree more. Education is not only an investment in our children, but an investment in our town. I respectfully ask you to please support the Bridgewater students by increasing the amount funded to the district in the FY20 budget to be in alignment with that of our partners from Rainham. Thank you.
Ryan Lasivita, 115 Beach Street, Bridgewater. Good evening, Mr. President, and through you, the Town Council. As I have already stated, my name is Ryan Lasivita, and I am a junior at the Bridgewater Rainham Regional High School who is involved in many aspects of the music department. I'm here tonight to talk about the general need of a budget increase for the school district, highlighting the needs of the music department. I love high school at Bridgewater, don't get me wrong, but recent budget cuts have definitely hit the school hard, with the most noticeable hits being the loss of an art teacher and the continued lack of a second music teacher. Since band and instrument lessons were put back into the middle school day, the number of students entering high school with a passion for music has increased dramatically. Ensembles like the school band and choral groups are going to more intense competitions, and other extracurricular ensembles are gaining more attention. Even those ensembles that are not competing are still seeing an increase in members and interest. And yet, there is still only one high school music teacher to shoulder an entire department during the day, after school, and in evening and weekend events. If these groups cannot get the funds they need to continue competing and operating, things might return to a time where music is no longer an option for education in Bridgewater Rainham. I understand it is very hard to find ways to increase revenue in our town, and it is equally as difficult to fund every department in Bridgewater. But I truly believe that education is extremely important for the town and the district, because teaching the future generations is more important now than ever before. So I respectfully ask the town council to do anything it can to increase the budget of the school district. I've had a fantastic time in the Bridgewater schools, especially in the music department, and I have no doubt that I will have more great experiences to come. I want every child who walks into a Bridgewater school to have the opportunity to follow their passion. Thank you for continuing your hard work needed to find the additional funding that our schools need.
Hi, Carlton Hunt, 80 Austin Street. I just came out of a meeting with the Finance Committee of the town. Lots of good details. It's way over my head in terms of details. But one of the problems I have is you're going to discuss in detail tonight or take input on it, but yet here's the summary that's in your, for the public education. I was told somewhat patronizingly, well, the details are on the town website. There's a whole narrative up there. Why isn't the narrative in here so I can understand what this budget's about? Why aren't we comparing last year's to this year's in some simple form so that we know where the town is investing the money that they have in major increases in the town? That's a question I have that I simply don't understand why we, the people, aren't getting the full information that we need and are told to go to a website that has a document that's a half an inch thick and go find the details for yourself. I find that egregious. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Erin Ellis, and I live at 760 North Street in Bridgewater. Good evening. I am here as a concerned parent of 2 young children. I have a daughter who is currently in 1st grade at the Mitchell School, and I have a son who will be entering kindergarten next year. The estimated class sizes for next year based on the students that currently attend the Mitchell are as follows. 1st grade, 27 students per class. 2nd grade, 28 to 29 students per class. And 3rd grade, 31 students per class. These are the numbers that we will see if no new positions are added to the elementary school. And these numbers do not include any move-ins over the summer or throughout the school year. To put that into perspective, so far during the 2018-2019 school year, the Mitchell Elementary School has had 105 new families move into Bridgewater with elementary-aged students. That means that those numbers that are at or almost at 30 students per classroom are bound to continue to grow throughout the next year. And as construction of new houses around town continues, more and more families with young children will be drawn to move to Bridgewater. What is most concerning to me is at the kindergarten level. These are numbers that we are unsure of at this point because families are still enrolling for the 2019-2020 school year and will continue to do so throughout the summer. Currently, there is an average of 25 students per kindergarten class at the Mitchell School. This year, my son is attending a private preschool where he is in a class of 11 students with 2 teachers. Next year, he will enter the Mitchell School as a kindergartner and will be placed in a classroom with a minimum of 25 students with 1 teacher. He will be in a classroom with students who have also spent time in public or private preschools. But there will be students who have never been a part of any type of formal classroom and who have never been in any educational environments. There will be students who can identify and write their own names, but there will be students who cannot identify a single letter in the alphabet. There will be students who can count to 20 or can count to 100, but there will be students who cannot even count to 5. There will be students who will have unidentified behavioral problems, students with unidentified learning disabilities, and students with social and emotional issues that have never been addressed. 25 or more of these little ones, 5 years old, will be placed in a classroom for over 6 hours a day with one caregiver who is asked to help them meet the demanding state standards, all while also trying to teach them appropriate classroom behavior and make the curriculum accessible for every learner. I know that you have all been working hard to try and give the school system the budget it should have. But what is being discussed as a proposed budget just does not meet the needs of our students or the needs of the district. I ask that the council reevaluate the town finances in order to hire the new positions the school desperately needs. We as a town must do better for our students. Thank you.
Thank you.
Danielle Silva, 20 Tommy Ann Terrace. Good evening, President Haley, member of the Town Council, Mr. Dutton, and Attorney Rollins. I've truly appreciated the opportunity to speak and share information regarding school funding over the last few meetings, and I am sincerely grateful for the time that you take to listen. It's so important that we take into consideration class size and social emotional needs of our students when considering the funding needs of our schools. Based on the current numbers, if school started tomorrow, for next year, we would have 31 students in each 3rd grade classroom, and that doesn't count move-ins between now and September. And as a 3rd grade teacher, I can speak from experience. These numbers are not what's in the best interest of kids. Every child, every day, deserves time to meet in differentiated learning groups to meet their academic needs. I'm going to speak a little off cuff because these kids every day, I can tell you, educators want that opportunity to meet with kids. You want a deli conference, you know how you get the deli number at the deli? We do that with kids when we do writing. And you want one-on-one time, and there's nothing like that. And with 31, it's going to make it really difficult for teachers who want that so desperately to be able to do that. And the size of the rooms at Mitchell, if you have 31 students, and really best practice is differentiated instruction, where you're going to have centers throughout your room, a daily 5, a math daily 3. And just the functionality of the room isn't the correct space for them if you have 31 in there. I'll go back, but that's just my heart of 3rd grade with 31. The class size make it challenging to effectively meet those needs. A well-known educator and a powerful TED Talk speaker, Rita Pearson, who I highly recommend, she said, every child deserves a champion, an adult who will never give up on them, who understands the power of connection and insists they become the best possible they can be. The power of relationships and connections with students is a key piece to student success. A classroom community with smaller class sizes helps students flourish both socially and academically. We as a community, whether school committee, town council, educators, parents, community members, we are the champions for the next generation. I was told by a remarkable mentor teacher, if you're doing what's in the best interest of students, you can never, ever go wrong. That's why I stand here, again, as the last Hail Mary, to ask you to please increase the funding contribution for the school district budget for the FY20 school year. We want our community to create citizens that can meet their full potential. A child's educational experience is their building blocks of their social and academic pathway. Together, let's set them up for success. I thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Allison Aducci, 50 Sea Tower Drive in Bridgewater. Good evening, Mr. President and the members of the Town Council. I've lived in Bridgewater for almost 13 years. I have a 5th grader at the Williams Intermediate School and a 2nd grader at the Mitchell. I've been the treasurer for JMSPA, which is the PTA at the Mitchell School, for the past 6 years. During my time there, the parents of Mitchell students and the surrounding community have fundraised and donated money, which the PTO uses to supplement the spending of the school district. In the past 6 years, JMSPA has purchased the following: 30 iPads with cases and carts for $16,954. Playground toys for the children to play with at recess for $708. Wiggle chairs to help students that have difficulty with sitting still and focusing for $13,357. Document cameras for the teachers for $3,564. Water filling stations for $4,312. Seat sacks for students to put their supplies in for $4,611. Fence for the playground area for $6,590. 185 Chromebooks and 6 carts for $49,965. Without these, the 3rd grade students would not be able to take the computer-required MCAS test this year. Reimbursement to teachers for classroom supplies and educational material to support their teaching of the state-mandated curriculum for $16,728. Academic enrichment programs, which bring in outside performers, museums, and others to supplement curriculum, including field trips and other topics such as anti-bullying and the importance of reading, for $47,155. That totals $163,943. Due to the district's priority of having small class sizes and the ever-changing technology needs, it has been necessary for JMSPA to make these purchases, or our children would not receive the education that they deserve. The school committee has painstakingly cut the requested budget from the district for years in a row due to insufficient funding from our town. This is no longer acceptable. I have watched numerous nail salons and vape stores occupy space in our downtown. I see how much of our town resources are used to deal with the college. I have watched hundreds of houses be built in just the last few years alone. Houses have been approved to be built with no apparent regard of how it would affect our schools. With no new move-ins from now until the start of the 2019-2020 school year, there'll be 31 students in my son's 3rd grade classroom. There's a pretty good chance that his classroom will be in a science lab at the middle school, with limited space, making it practically impossible for the teachers to teach effectively. That is not okay. I've had serious conversations with numerous friends and neighbors about leaving this town if the funding issues aren't resolved. The town needs to come up with new and different ideas and means of raising revenue. It needs to be our priority of this town to have those conversations and start making change happen. I don't say this as someone who sits idly by. Many of the people here tonight are the people that make this town what it is. They are the PTO volunteers, the 4th of July committee members, the church volunteers, the sports coaches, the school committee members. We are doers, and we're asking you to do as well in regard to coming up with a financial plan that will support our town and schools. I respectfully request that you provide the requested funding for the 2019-2020 school year. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, thank you. Moving on to the next agenda item. Appointments, having none. Hearings, none as well. No license transactions. And presentations. We do have Mr. David Moore is here for the Hometown Heroes Banner Project.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you to the members of the council and to the town, our program's doing great. Our goal was to have 75 banners up for Memorial Day. We're going to come pretty close to that. We'll be a few short, but we may get them in at the last minute. Tonight, rather than take a lot of your time, I would like to extend an invitation to all of you to come to our kickoff event at the Vets Club this Friday night, 6 o'clock. At 6 o'clock, there'll be just a social time. All of the banners will be on display. We've added little cards that give you a little information on each of the vets, or most of them anyways. And then we will have a small meal. And then we have a very powerful speaker coming in. I don't know if you have heard Mr. Monty from Rainham speak. He lost his son in Afghanistan, I think in 2006. And he was also instrumental in the flag presentations at the National Cemetery down at Otis, Camp Edwards. He does a great job in speaking about veterans. So you're all invited. Come down, view the banners. You don't have to stay. Come in anytime, whatever you want. But we hope that some of you can make it. And thanks again for your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Item I, Town Manager's Report.
All right, thank you, Mr. President. I have just a few items this evening. One, I just wanted to let you know we've got, right now we have enormous number of projects going on in town, ranging from comprehensive plan, water treatment facility planning, sewer upgrades, traffic planning, detailed capital planning, LED streetlight upgrade, memorial building renovations, street drainage replacement planning, road replacement planning, emergency drainage replacement, water line replacement, Elm Street reconstruction, and many, many others. But I do want to use the opportunity to publicly thank all the departments who are playing a role in planning or executing these projects. They do their day-to-day work, and then they've all, to one degree or another, stepped up and done the extras that I've asked of them. So I just want to give them a shout out, because sometimes they don't get the accolades that they deserve. I do want to give you a report on Rainbow's End. We've completed the assessment. Also met with Bridgewater Soccer, youth soccer. And I've had an initial meeting with the DOC. We're following up again later this week to develop the work plan to remove probably most of Rainbow's End Playground. That's part of the assessment that Charlie Simons will be working on before the actual removals begin. So that is in the works and imminent, and we probably, once we know disposal costs and disposal requirements, we'll be coming to you with an appropriation request for that. But it looks as if a good portion of the work that we'll have to do, the DOC will be helping us with. We do know of an issue with excise tax bills that went out over the last month. We've had been able to segregate some of the affected bills and place those in a separate file. Long and the short of it is that we think there was a little glitch in the electronic billing invoice cloud, and so that is being worked on currently. But we are fairly sure we have the file of all the people that were charged. Essentially, the problem is that some people were charged a demand fee, demand notice, and had not received their excise tax bill, the original bill, yet. So we're making adjustments if people are coming in. If somebody has already paid a demand notice and is on the list of people that had not received the first bill, then we will issue a refund. If you're not sure, if you're in that situation, then please feel free to call the collector's office, and they will let you know, one, if you have paid the demand fee, if you don't remember, and two, if you were on the list of electronic billing and did not receive the first bill. So their number, 508-697-0923, so you can give them a call. Just want to give you an update on the Memorial Building. We continue to plan for the future of that building. We're actually working with the architect currently. The biggest item on that building and the renovations there, we know we have to create a handicapped access to the front of the building. We've had some preliminary meetings with some of the committee chairs that are involved in permitting or involved in the historic portions of that building. Everybody seems to be relatively pleased with at least the handicapped access and how the architect is treating that. So that's good news. We continue to plan to use that lower level for paper storage, and that will be paper storage that we're required to keep, not historic documents, but building files, Concom files, and so forth. The upper the upper level. We've changed our plan there a little bit. Originally, we had anticipated creating an upper level of some meeting space and some display space. Unfortunately, our water treatment plant, which is one of the things that we are working on, the initial cost projections came in higher than we had anticipated. That building was originally designed to house water and sewer employees, as well as provide treatment for the water. I will add that DEP was not terribly happy that we were going to house administrative staff in the treatment facility or as part of the treatment facility. It's not a best practice, but regardless, the price came in more than the appropriation that the council has already made, and that triggered a little bit of a reassessment of that project. And we've now decided to remove the office space that would have been part of that project, part of the water treatment facility project, which was disappointing, but honestly, the reanalysis had a little bit of a silver lining in that we looked at the space needs and the allocations throughout. And what we're looking to do now is use the memorial building as some office space. There will be meeting space as well, and there will still continue to be some display space, but we're looking at the memorial building to house the DPW administrative side, and we think that is actually, in retrospect, something that we should have looked at long ago. It keeps as many of the offices in essentially a campus. If they can't all be in this building, then at least it'll be good to have them a little bit closer by. So it's close to here. They're a little bit more of a synergy, and most importantly, it actually gets more people working in the downtown area, so we're hoping for a little bit of a residual boost to the downtown shops and so forth. So that is what we're looking at this point. I'll obviously come back with more detail as we get further down that project. The LED light project is on track. Had a meeting today about that. And we are proceeding with Green Communities grant application funding. We're also proceeding with additional grant funding through the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, and we anticipate, if all goes well, that work will be done by the end of the calendar year. As you recall, we will be purchasing our streetlights. We have a cost from National Grid. It's not terribly expensive. That part's not terribly expensive, but as part of a purchase of those lights and the conversion to LED, we also required to do a maintenance contract with a company. That'll be an independent procurement, and we'll go out and find somebody to maintain those lights. That would be the person that we call when a light goes out, for instance. It would not be National Grid at that point. We also are, this week, are trying to install the last of our water meters. It's been an ongoing project, but we're coming very close to a close with roughly 30 meters left to be scheduled. Most of these are households that have had made no response to numerous letters, registered letters, and door hangers. So we're hoping that if we have to get to the point where we shut off water service, that will probably begin to happen on Thursday. So I do encourage anybody to reach out to the water department if they haven't, if they're on that list of roughly 30 folks, and schedule something as soon as possible. And I do want to just advertise on Friday, Mr. Solmonti, our finance director, will be leading a Facebook Live presentation, and anybody's in this room, anybody's welcome to come. But he's going to just very briefly start to go over the basics of building a budget with revenue projections and how we come up with the expense side. So a little bit of an educational initiative that we're trying to take as now the budget has been submitted to the council and becomes the council's decision-making process. So that's coming up noon on Friday, and that is what I have.
Thank you, Michael Dutton. Questions for the town manager? Discussion? Yes, sir, Mr. George.
Thank you. Through you to the town manager. So a couple questions. McElwain, can we get an update on what is or isn't going on over there?
Excuse me. The McElwain is the project proponents are in front of the ZBA, I believe, next week. And once they secure their comprehensive permit approval, then they have already applied, but that's another piece towards their application for DHCD funding and tax credit, historic tax credit funding, and so forth. So that once that happens, it'll begin to trigger more of the funding applications for them, and we're still targeting a closing in early 2020.
Okay. Old Town Hall. Have we had any interest, any updates? That has been sitting for an extremely long time, and I think we're getting to the point where we've got to make a decision on what we're going to do.
I agree completely. We have a grant application in with the Mass Cultural Council to look at a feasibility study of converting that into a community center of sorts or community space. That we will find out, I believe, if not in May, I believe that we get a notification in early June whether or not we've secured that feasibility funding.
Okay. What's been the biggest obstacle for us to get any type of interest in the building?
That's a good question. I wouldn't want to try to put myself in the place of any prospective users. I think in terms of commercial use, if we were to convert it to a commercial use, I think the expense of upgrading the building to commercial code is one. Certainly parking is another. In terms of, well, I think in terms of any use, any commercial use, whether it's retail or office space or what have you, I think the expense of upgrading the systems in the building is probably one of the biggest factors, as well as the parking.
Okay. Have we done anything in regards to the heat issue? I know there are other things that, as you pointed out, are going to need upgrading, but and the reason I'm asking is some of the feedback I've gotten from people is one of the biggest obstacles right now is the boiler.
The boiler is dead.
Exactly. So I do appreciate all the fact, but if we don't have heat in a building, I don't care all the technical upgrades that we have, no one's really going to want to use it. So do we have a plan to replace the boiler?
We've set aside a little over $30,000 that the council appropriated. We do have essentially temporary heat in the spaces that we use for storage of documents. If we do not receive the feasibility funding from Mass Cultural Council, then our intent is to go ahead and replace the boiler as is. If we do get funding through Mass Cultural Council, then we would not spend that money to replace the heat, because other cultural council, specifically cultural council grant funds are available, or we can apply for those to replace HVAC systems.
Okay. And my final question is this, and I think this would be very beneficial to everyone in the room, people that have come, talked very passionately. So you've got your proposed budget, and we've got it out there. So can you just give an overview of the mechanisms that the council has in regards to decision-making, be it taking it as is or making adjustments as we see fit?
Nope, that's a great question. So the way that the process spells out as part of the charter and state law, I formulate the budget, and that's my job. We obviously keep Budget and Finance and Finance Committee apprised of our progress. The council has laid out through council budget resolution, sort of the guardrails or guidelines that we have to formulate that budget. Once we complete the budget, we do a very preliminary budget in February. As you know, the charter requires that. Traditionally, that's been what we've often referred to as a needs-based budget, a pie-in-the-sky budget. This year, we decided that that's not a useful exercise to go through. So the February budget, we tried to get more realistic with the figures, so that we had a little bit of a lens into what the April budget would be. April 1st, I'm required to submit the budget, which we did, with a budget message, which you received and is on the website. So at this point, the council, and I don't want to take the thunder from Budget and Finance Committee members, but I believe that the intent would be, as we've done in similar past years, to meet jointly with the Finance Committee and go through the budgets fairly methodically. If the council feels that it wants to make adjustments, it can make adjustments, but it has to be sort of neutral. You can add here and take away from here, and so forth. So then, one last piece, the council has 45 days from the April 1st date in which to take action on the budget.
Okay. Do we have the ability to be able to both make adjustments to revenue figures as well as expense items, or are we regulated just to one?
You're regulated just to the expense figures.
Just the expense figures?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Gallagher?
Thank you, Mr. President. A few questions tonight. On the LED project for the streetlights, those in town that pay for their own streetlight, is the company going to reach out to those people at some point to ask them if they would like to have an LED light in, or are they going to do that anyway? Do you know how that might work?
That's actually something that came up today, and we're reaching out to National Grid as well as our own roadways department to get a list of areas, public ways where the streetlights are not paid for by the town. And my intent, barring any dramatic or radical change in the cost to us, my intent would be to try to get the whole town on a single standardized light and system. So we know there are neighborhoods, there are quirks all over town, and there were deals made many years ago on many different areas where the neighbors were going to pay for the streetlights, and the streetlights, for 5 or 10 years were paid by a little neighborhood association. Then somebody moved on or passed away. Neighborhood association fell apart, and all of a sudden the lights were still on, but nobody was paying any bills. And then the lights eventually got shut off by National Grid because they weren't getting paid. And so there are a lot of these kinds of quirks. So our intent is to try to get every neighborhood and every street that has legitimate streetlights, which would otherwise be known as town lights, on the same sort of playing field. So we're trying to resolve a lot of those issues through this process.
Okay. On the water meter project that's going on, or it's pretty much complete except for 29 people, are those mostly single-family homes, or are some of those 29 residents multiple dwellings or apartments or whatever? Do you know? Or
I believe they're single-family homes, but I can take a quick look.
because I received a call this afternoon from someone that had one of those on their door when they got home, and they have reached out, and I did get a call back from that person saying that they are no longer going to shut their water off because they've made arrangements to meet with them. As you said in your report, and I can say I hope that those 29 homeowners are watching us tonight, right, Bill? Hopefully, yeah.
Hopefully, yeah.
And they reach out to, because I don't know what they will do if their water is shut off, or I don't even know what will happen if their water is turned back on, whether it creates a surge or something. So hopefully we're careful about that if we're going to shut them off, that's all. And I'm sure you've gone through this to make sure we don't have any incidents and so forth with that. It's a tough thing. The World War I memorial out front, the fence that's been down, the part of the fence that's been down for a couple months now, do you know what the status is of that and when it can be repaired?
We actually don't know. That's one of the cases. Every once in a while, well, very frequently, the fence gets knocked down by really tractor trailers. In this case, I don't believe we know who knocked it down. We know obviously it was knocked down, but we don't know who. So insurance recovery is challenging in those cases. My request to the roadways department is to remove the pieces that are sitting there and clean it up, and not replace that until we have a more comprehensive plan for that corner, because that's literally sometimes once every year, twice a year, the granite pillars get knocked over. So we're just trying to figure out how to preserve those. If we put them back in, we don't want them to simply be knocked over again. So.
Yeah, thank you. On that same note, I know we met sometime, I think it was late fall, mid-fall. I mean, could we try to get a meeting soon to talk about that World War I memorial and the common area to see? So we had 3 proposals from the Boston Architectural School, who did a very good job. I don't know if we've selected which plan we want or what. Perhaps in the next, I know we got the budget to deal with, which is going to be an animal in itself. But at some point, we could get a meeting together to find out where we're going and where we can go with that.
Absolutely.
On the school budget and some of the points that Councilor George brought up, are you in communications with your counterpart in Rainham regarding the school budget at all?
Short answer is no.
Okay. Didn't mean to choke him up, but I hope he's okay. Okay, so, but we had a Budget and Finance Committee meeting before this, and I understand that we will have discussions about the budget going forward, mostly in committee. So people that are watching the council meetings, we're going to probably have very little discussion about the budget in these meetings. They're going to take place in the Budget and Finance Committee meetings, which are open to the public as well. which I encourage people to go to that, because that's where most of these decisions will be made, I believe. Or recommendations will come to the council from that body. Based on what I've seen, and I do have the printout of the 40 or so page budget that was sent to us all. I know we can't tell the town financial team about the revenue, but based on what I see and trends in the past and where we are, I mean, I do think there's some wiggle room in the revenue. Whether anything will be done or can be done, that's up to you and your financial team, but it would help all departments, in my view. And to be honest with you, and I'd say this to my colleagues with all respect, some of the restrictions and some constraints we have put on ourselves with budget resolutions and budget directives that are going to probably tie our hands if we can move forward with some of these, if some of the revenues can or cannot be increased. So that's something we need to be cognizant of as we move forward. So I hope that you would be in more dialogue with what's happening on the Rainham side as far as getting any correspondence that we heard from the finance committee chairman at one of these meetings, that he said that they were willing to, put forth, I think, about $80-something thousand and directed where that money would go. I would have thought that we would have gotten some notification as to officially that was happening. Based on the meeting we had before this meeting at Budget and Finance, our finance team was not aware of any significant increase that the Rainham side was willing to put forward. So communications is important. Thank you.
Mr. Wood?
Thank you. First, the parking on the common. I had mentioned a couple weeks ago, it was still snowing, that stuff, that I'd been approached by someone that was trying to use a handicap spot, and someone had parked in the space next to the handicap spot. If you go back to I like to point out that one of my first acts on the council was to change the bylaw for the sidewalk striping in the downtown. It's a major accomplishment. But in that order, it also pointed out that there's space next to the striped area that needs protection from anyone parking there, and that applies to the handicap spot also. So do you have an update of what might be done there?
I've actually forwarded that request to the roadway superintendent, and I can tell you that it's still probably too early to actually be putting down paint. The roadways have to be a certain temperature consistently, similar to when you paint your house. But I'll follow up with him.
Okay. All right, thank you. Secondly, so we did meet tonight, Budget and Finance. You weren't there, but the finance team was. Mr. Dutton, back in January, at the end of January, there was communication between you and the school system over what the estimated increase, again, an increase to the assessment would be. I believe that is around 3.4%, correct?
We had been identifying, I think as far back as October, between a 3.2 and a 3.4, and we had established, according to the revenue sharing model, that we could do a 3.41% percent increase.
And then in tonight's financial budget, we talked about an increase of 3.5, so even a slightly higher assessment. That's correct, right?
Correct.
Okay. That's all. Thanks.
Mr. Chase?
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you, please, to the town manager, if I may. Mr. Dutton, I know from your comments tonight with respect to the Rainbow's End Playground, if my understanding is correct, what you're speaking of is a complete dismantling of the playground equipment that was installed there and removal of that. What is, if you can tell us at this point, what is to be the ultimate disposition of that site?
From our perspective right now, we are not planning anything. I think I've mentioned to the council before that there's a discrepancy. There's some discrepancy in the legal documents that leads us to think that we may or may not control that property. Based on my discussions with Bridgewater Youth Soccer, they may, in lieu of the current Rainbow's End, they may try to put in some kind of very basic swing sets or something so that, their smaller kids who are watching their brothers and sisters play soccer would have some opportunity to do something in that general area, but there's no plan as of yet.
So there's no plan for the town to actually do so in any event?
Correct.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Other questions, Mr. Columbotus?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Dutton, following up on Mr. George's questions about the town hall, the council passed an order, I don't know, probably almost 2 years ago, that directed you to put the town hall in the National Register of Historic Places. And the benefit of that was that anyone who might gain a long-term lease, I guess we're leaning away from sale, but a sale or even a long-term lease would allow any redeveloper of that site to get state and federal historic tax credits. And in order to get those tax credits, the building would need to be on the National Register. The deadline for that, we expected that to be done already. And I haven't heard about it, so I assume it's not done. And I'm wondering where that stands and what the next step is on that.
We had hired a consultant to guide us through that process. Unfortunately, the consultant had to abandon that project, and we hired a second consultant, and unfortunately, that consultant then told us that they were getting out of the business. So it's absolutely on the list of things to get done, but we've been striking out with consultants to guide us. And honestly, if we had the staff, and I'm not proposing that we hire staff, but if it's not a terribly difficult process. It involves our local historic commission and basically requests to the National Park Service. So it's not a terribly difficult process, but it does require in some expertise in how to get that done. So we'll be going back out to look for a consultant to again guide us through. But that your point about the benefits of placing it in the historic register are absolutely accurate. It makes not only that building but that area a more attractive redevelopment possibility, which is particularly pertinent now that there's essentially an opportunity zone overlay over that.
And more on the town hall. Have you made any progress in emptying that building? I think to Mr. George's point about the attractiveness of that site, you and I have agreed that having that upper floor, the second floor empty, to take down some of those partition walls that were added decades ago would make it really plain to anyone who sees it that this is a really grand space. I mean, that room on the second floor goes the full width of the building and most of the length, so it's without any columns or anything. So it presents quite an opportunity. It might be hard for some people to picture it. So if we could empty that out, and it'd be that much more obvious, the potential of that building. So I'm wondering what sort of progress you've made on that.
That's another one that's on the list, quite honestly, and we've actually got great help from Bristol Plymouth Tech School to gut the electric, which was obviously the first step in that project, and we just need to find the resources and to be able to actually do the gutting and get the project or get the document digitization process and project underway. So,
right. And also to follow up on Mr. Gallagher's points about revenue, we absolutely can't adjust revenue estimates that are in this budget, right? And the avenue for increasing those revenue estimates would be through the budget resolution. And it's too late to do that this year. But if we want to look forward to next year, we would amend that budget resolution, right? Mm-hmm. One last thing. Do you have any revenue figures for the paid parking?
I can get that, and I'll send that out. I don't have it
Has it
offhand.
Do you have any sense of how it's been going?
Fairly well. there's a positive cash flow, and we're happy with that. I don't think it's caught on, certainly in the lower Spring Street parking lot, but we talked to Laz, our contractor, several weeks ago, and they were going to do a little bit of a publicity push to get that occupied.
Okay. And one last thing, about the memorial building. I'm unclear as to how you're going to appropriate the space. There's the big room kind of in the middle and two smaller rooms off to the side as you first walk in that. So how will those spaces be allocated exactly?
So far, we know that we have to, as I mentioned, we have to provide handicapped access to the front door. That's just what we have to do. We also have to provide restrooms on both levels. The lower level, because of its use, will not require two restrooms. The upper level will require two restrooms, no matter how you dice it. In order to try to preserve the historic components of the inside of the building, it's important from a historic perspective to create space essentially create space that can be, if you change your mind, can be pulled out. Reversed so that the historic, you bring back the way it was, basically. So what the architect has designed, and again, this is all preliminary, you'll see the whole thing when it's a little further along. The bathrooms would go in the center of that, essentially that open space. We'd create two workspaces behind that on the back end of the building, and then you'd have meeting space on one side in one of the offices that are there, and office space in the other office that's there. So
is there any provision for fulfilling the original intent of that building, which is to be a war memorial? I mean, I know there's been some, I think all along we've been some understanding that there'd be some sort of, historic displays or war memorials type
we've asked the architect to, so that would give you, when you walk into the building, it would give you a bit of a wall right in front of you. So we've asked the architect to create display space, appropriate display space for whatever historic, rotating displays would go in there.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much.
Mr. Gallagher, I think you had a follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to clarify one thing, Mike, is that the revenue estimates, the council cannot dictate or tell the town manager or the finance team you need to increase this. We can only suggest. But it can be done. We can ask or encourage, or the town finance team through you can adjust the revenues during this budget process. They're not set in stone yet, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
Yeah, that's correct.
But your finance team needs to see some sort of evidence through analysis or whatever, yes, this can be tweaked a little bit and this can be tweaked a little bit. Because we cannot tell them or them to do that.
Right.
But it can be done.
Right.
Yes.
And I, for what it's worth, and may not be worth anything, but, I do think, we've got needs across town.
Sure.
And we certainly know that the schools, specifically the Bridgewater Rainham District, has need. We know that. So we're not tone deaf. Our charge, which the council does set to some extent, is to craft a budget within the revenue constraints we know we have. We have been very successful in making sure that we follow a very methodical process, and we'll continue to follow the methodical process when the budget goes to Budget and Finance Committee. And you're right, you're absolutely right. Your point about most of the decisions and most of the discussion about the budget happens in committee. And I fully expect that this room will be the location for those meetings.
Thank you.
Mr. George? And Mr. Fitzgibbon.
So, follow up to Mr. Wood's question. So, with the budget, the 3.5, I think also at the joint budget committee with the district, I think the superintendent went through in nauseating detail exactly what the ask was going to be from Bridgewater on the increase to the assessment. So I don't want people walking out of here thinking that, and there were people from the town in the room. So this is not done just in a small group. So if we're going to put out their communication, I think communication in multiple aspects needs to be looked at in this case to make sure that we don't go through this again. Thank you.
Mr. Fitzgibbons?
I'll defer to Mr. Wood.
So I think while we're on the subject, and this doesn't directly have on the orders, but while we're on the subject, so maybe if I can quickly summarize some of the discussion we had in the Budget and Finance meeting before this, because we only had one outsider sitting in with us. These are very important meetings. They're critical to how we construct the strategy of the town going forward, and all of it is based on revenue. Is just a calculated shot in the dark, right? You can't base revenue on anything but projections. When we vote as a council, we're voting expenses. We know what the contracts are going to be. We know what the assessment's going to be. We know what the other pieces that the county needs. All the pieces are budgeted, and that's set. So the only way to roll back an expense is to roll back an expense through cuts in personnel or other costs, right? So revenues are the thing that gives us the guidepost by which we create the expenses. And some of these, and we had a sheet of projected revenues here, and I just want to point out some of the highlights of the discussion really quick, if I may. So a lot of the local receipts are the drivers. So those fluctuate up and down. And for the past several years, those have gone up. Excise tax has dramatically gone up. We've had people getting newer cars since the collapse of 2008. We've had a lot of people doing leases instead of purchases. The average age of the car has shrunk from 10 years down to 1 or 2 years. That's a trend that is most likely not going to continue. So the increases, the trends that we've seen upwards will probably not exist. We've added to our revenue side, and there's a lot of people, maybe not in this room, that we're not in favor of this, but we have $400,000 in revenue here tied to our actions on the 2 medical marijuana dispensaries and their allocation of cultivation and host agreements. That's $400,000 in new revenue that we didn't have a couple of years ago that's showing up in here. Some of the other ones are actually fixed without being able to move at all, and that has to do with levy limits or taxation on property, and some of the excluded debt, some of the, I'm looking at some of the other pieces that we have. But all in all, we're judging that the revenue incoming this year is about $57 million. The council here put a resolution together last October, I was the sponsor of it, that said to the finance team, hold back about 1.75%. And the reason I bring this up is tonight, when we were talking about it with Tony, he said, well, you could say 0.7, but that's cutting the margin pretty tight. You could say 0, but that's cutting all margin away from it. So what happens in the budget cycle is we will project out that 1.75. If everything projects as it's trending, we will see almost $1 million in free cash. That's known, that's projected. What happens to that free cash is there's another policy set by the council on how to allocate that free cash, and the free cash goes into capital reserves, and the capital reserves are used for purchasing the truck like we did last week. The capital reserves are for buying new boilers in schools. The capital reserves are for other things that need large capital items. And that's how we pay for those things, similar to how the CPC works. You take in reserves, you have 5 buckets, you put the housing bucket and the open space bucket, the administrative bucket. We have that in reserve and we can use that. We projected about 1.5% as a holdback. So when you look at these numbers on things like motor vehicle excise tax, there's actually a holdback of $300,000. You go, oh, that's the solution, $300,000 right there. But that's part of the 1.75% that the resolution said to hold back. That's what Tony put in the formula to get down to the bottom line of holding that 1.75 back. And then the allocation of the rest of the revenue. is projected out for all the expenses, and that's the basis for the budget. And that was the start of our conversation tonight, to kind of review where the numbers were for revenue. Monthly, we get a report that we put together, that the finance team gives us, that tells us about the trends in revenue, trends in expenses. We look at the close of business at the end of the fiscal year. We see those numbers. There's always transfers for things that were missed. And so, long-winded wise, we're going to have a lot of meetings between now and the time that we vote on the budget. It will happen in committee mostly. Finance committee will be involved, budget and finance committee, the finance director, his team, the town manager. If you're interested in the budget, you need to come to those meetings and take a look at the details alongside us so you can understand the process. Thank you.
Mr. Fitzgibbons.
Just to follow up on this whole budget thing, because I had a few other different questions for the town manager, but I just...
First follow up and then your other questions.
Then I'll get into my stuff. I just urged Mr. Wood, as chairman of the Budget and Finance Committee, to hold the meetings here and get them on TV when you have those Budget and Finance Committee meetings, so that people can see them as they need to. I don't know that you have to broadcast it live, but you can at least have the cameras running and have it up there. Mr. Dutton, going back to one of my favorite subjects, school building committee, have we heard anything from the state?
Nope, actually, I'll be attending a meeting tomorrow, at which a board meeting, MSBA board meeting, at which they'll be voting to either, presumably to accept the town's request.
Thank you. You mentioned that the McElwain School was in front of the ZBA. I'm assuming that the ZBA understands what the town council wants to happen?
Yes.
And this is kind of a more general question that I'd ask my colleagues to think about on the council as well. But the ZBA is essentially appointed by you, correct?
Correct.
And so, to the extent that we've asked you to do something, and whether it be the ZBA or the planning board or another board that you appoint goes against a policy that the council has set, how do you address that? And is there a role for us that we need to address?
I think if there is a project, and I don't know that the McElwain is necessary, but if there is a project that the council is very supportive of, and it's in front of either the planning board or the zoning board of appeals, the council always has the prerogative to write a letter or demonstrate its support, or as individuals go to the respective meetings, planning board or ZBA or Concom, whatever the case may be, and certainly voice support. Or by the flip side, if there's something that the council is opposed to, certainly has the option to do that.
Thank you. And then last, kind of circling back to the budget, Ms. Aducci did a great job outlining all the fundraising that JEMSPA's done to pay for various things throughout the Mitchell School. You talked about public ways where streetlights are not paid by the town in an answer to a question. We have several enterprise funds that don't run on general town revenue, but run from specific funds that are paid for by the users of those services. I'm thinking especially recreation and the transfer station, among other things. And I'm trying to think just generally about residents of the town, not folks who come from out of town, like people who go to the golf course. I get that. But it would be interesting to know, and I don't know if there's capacity to do this, but to understand in general what the shadow tax burden is on various people in the town around, okay, you have 3 children in the school system, so not only are you paying your property taxes, but you're also likely paying for a parking spot if they're in the high school, you're paying club fees or sports fees to the district, et cetera. You're donating to JEMSPA. And we're asking residents who live on public ways, but we don't want to pay for the streetlights to pay for themselves if they want to, and various other things like that. And it's more of a bigger question. You don't have to answer it tonight. But it's a more of a bigger question is, what's the actual shadow tax burden on the people of the town, and how does that fall on people? Obviously, things happen at the senior center that the seniors are going to be giving money toward rather than being funded by the town. So just understanding all of those sources of revenue that are actually going into providing municipal services, not in as far as what a budget is, but about what's actually done, would be an interesting thing to get to at some point. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I had a question regarding excise. I was reading that on actually had social media earlier today. So a notification went out, right? It wasn't the initial notification, right, of our dues for excise?
We think what happened, well, not to get too much into the weeds and drag it out, but I think what we believe happened is that that initial people that signed up for Invoice Cloud for excise tax, this has nothing to do with real estate taxes, specific to excise tax. We think that they did not get either the email or the text invoice to pay their initial bill. And so when the bill didn't get paid because they didn't get a bill, the town sends out, which is standard, sends out a demand notice that adds on a penalty for late payment. So we think it's a relatively small number, but evidently a vocal number, which is understandable. So we believe that there are some people that did not get the original electronic notification, but then got a demand notice. And had to pay the $20 demand fee. So
Great setup to the question. Are these people going to be refunded, and how is that going to work, or how's it seeming to look to work?
So we've isolated the files, and we've isolated the people that we believe did not get the electronic version of the bill, which is pretty verifiable, but did get the demand notice. If those people come in to pay that bill, the staff in the collector's office will look at the file to make sure that they really do owe the demand. But if they're in that file, then they won't be charged the demand. If there are people that did not receive the electronic bill and yet did pay the demand notice and the $20 penalty, we will proactively refund that $20 to those people. If there are people that don't know, all they have to do is call. We have all the records, and we know exactly who those people are, so they can call or they can come in and find out if they're eligible for that $20 refund. But we won't require any abatement forms or so forth for that. So they can just call or come in, either one.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? None. Thank you, Michael.
Mr. President,
Yes, Mr. Wood.
While everybody's still here, this is awesome that we have a large group. But for budget and finance questions, you can email me directly at wwood@bridgewaterma.org. I'd be happy to discuss anything on the budget with you. And times, details on the budget, whatever. So, thank you.
Sit down if you do.
Mr. President, I guess also in that interest, and just so these folks can understand what the process is, I'd make a motion to take item N, new business, out of order so that we can refer all these to the Budget and Finance Committee.
A second.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion on the motion?
I just think it's a very procedural matter, and we can talk about it, so.
Sure. I'll be voting against this, because my concern is that once we do that, the entire room will just get up and leave.
Be the first time at a town meeting.
I'm impressed that we read it out at almost 9 o'clock. Didn't have anybody. Any other discussion? Okay, motion made and seconded. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
Nay.
Looks like we're moving to new business.
So I'd make a motion on order FY 19055, acceptance of gift, to refer to the Budget and Finance Committees, subject to the town manager. Quick description of it.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on that? We're going to have a description from the town manager, so those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? None. Mr. Town Manager.
Just voted it.
I would have waited for him to
I went first, yeah.
do the description
Cart before the
first.
horse, I went right there. I just threw it right up front.
Guess you're off the hook on that one, Michael. I don't know how that went
That's it.
down.
It's the spasms, it's the muscle spasms, people.
Okay.
You already voted.
Yep, thank you.
All right, but it's a very generous gift from the Howard Foundation. We can say that, correct?
Yes, it's a, yes.
I guess I should have second for discussion. I'll be more procedural on that one.
All right, and I'll take all the FY 2020 budget orders and transfer orders and make an omnibus motion to refer to the Budget and Finance committees.
That's order 1 through 9.
Yes.
Second?
Motion made and seconded.
I just suggest we've had a lot of discussion about these. We've had a lot of input from public today about where they think we should allocate our funding.
Question.
And, I just re-urge my suggestion that the Budget and Finance committees be met here and be taped so that anyone can watch them at their convenience on BTV. Thank you.
Mr. Wood, did you have anything to add?
No, that
Discussion?
sounds good, thank
That's
you.
Perfect discussion. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? And that completes that section. Yes. And we are back to item J for discussions. First, Town Council letter encouraging a comprehensive review of the Regional School District Agreement, which is brought to us to discuss by Mr. George.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I think at the last town council meeting, I had brought up the fact that the regional school district agreement had not been reviewed in 20 years. It was almost the anniversary. So, and actually, Attorney Rollins, maybe you can just talk a little bit about the procedure, because I know that you had looked at it as well, and have had some discussions. Right now, correct me if I'm wrong, the position for the council is to send a letter to the school committee asking them to start the process of going through the review of the agreement, correct?
Yeah, so that's one avenue. So in the district agreement, it essentially says that the school committee and/or 10% of a respective town may petition for a review of the district agreement. So what I had explained when you had sent out the request to me was that the council can't necessarily direct the review of this agreement, but certainly the council can write a letter and encourage the committee to review the agreement. And/or obviously talk to constituents, because if 10% of the registered voters in the town have petitioned for the review of the agreement, then that's another avenue. But yeah, so the letter made sense based on that context.
Okay. And I don't know if you know the answer to this, but I'll ask the question anyway. If the school committee does agree that the agreement has to be reviewed, does either town have the option of not participating? Is it optional, or can they bring us together?
And I'm just going off my memory of the agreement, and this is outside of what I was looking at, but I believe what the agreement says is if the committee makes a determination that they're going to amend the agreement, that then goes to the voters, and then the voters then either approve or don't approve the changes.
Right.
So I think it's that simple.
That simple?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it has to be both towns approving.
Right, right. So, I mean, so in essence, and I know we're going to talk about this a little bit more, there'll be representation of Bridgewater, Rainham, probably the school committee.
Right.
And then from there, it'll go, I'm assuming the same way as we kind of did with charter review, is they meet, come with recommendations, submit them, but then would have to go through probably the process of sending them up to
Well,
Beacon Hill? I mean, I'm probably asking you questions. I'm not trying to put you on the spot here.
No, it's fine. I actually think that the way that the agreement was amended, I believe it was 2011, was that the town council in Bridgewater can make that vote. Obviously, you guys can defer it to a ballot if that's what you decide, but you can make that vote. In Rainham, it has to go through either a special meeting or a formal regular meeting.
Okay. So, I mean, in a nutshell, that's the letter to ask the school committee to start the process. We don't have the letter, but that's the intent, is to send one out.
Yes, Mr. Fitzgibbons?
I think it's always good to look at how we're doing business. And, I'd like to see what the letter says and what we're particularly advocating or not, whether it's open-ended or whether we're asking for certain specific looks, so that we know when the school committee comes back and whether they've addressed what the will of this council was in writing the letter, or if they've gone beyond that, which is certainly their prerogative. But just so we set clear expectations to them when we send the letter, and then, they can respond as they will. And obviously, we'll have to include as Mr. Gallagher was pointing out, the communication between the two towns being very important. We should copy our partner, Rainham, and perhaps even before we send it, ask them if they want to have input so that we could send it perhaps jointly.
Thank you. Mr. Gallagher?
Thank you, Mr. President. Did you say the agreement was last updated in 2011?
I think the one that I looked at over the course of this, I believe, was there was an amendment made which probably only had to do with updating the approval process from town meeting to town council. I'm not saying it was a total amendment. I'm saying there was. I notated at the back of the agreement there was an update in 2011. It wasn't redlined, so it wasn't distinguished. But I think it was probably to say the town council now in the town of Bridgewater takes the place of
Changed
the town
us from selectmen to councilmen.
I think that was the point of it, but I can't be certain. I didn't have the prior one.
Well, if it's not, then that would be a good reason to do an update if it still refers to us as selectmen.
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
It refers to the town council, and the last amendment was 2011, so I was just using common sense and thinking it correlated.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. George.
So, and great point on that. I would say to Mr. Fitzgibbons, at least from my intent, is to have a comprehensive, full review of the agreement. I think we all received a copy of it, and you can go through it, and there's multitude of areas that need to be reviewed and updated and things of that nature. So I'm just telling you my intent of asking for it. I would hope that our partners in Rainham would be in agreement, but obviously, I would probably ask Mr. Dutton to reach out to his counterpart and at least, test the waters to make sure that, where we should be doing this collectively. I think we can all benefit from this. It is going to take some time and effort on the towns, the school committee, however the case may be. So, but I'd like to get that started sooner rather than later, since it's probably 20 years overdue. But that's just my input.
Is there some kind of government thing we can do administratively to get this on a recurring discussion? Or, how would that work? Is it a regional thing?
You mean amongst this group?
The two groups. The Rainham group, the Bridgewater group.
Absolutely, you're welcome. You can always invite the Rainham selectmen to have a meeting with you, a joint meeting.
Well, are you talking about reviewing the agreement?
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's already in the agreement that it has to be reviewed every 5 years, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't recall seeing that.
Well, let me put it this way. If it isn't in there, it's going to be in there going forward. So
yes, if it isn't, I'd love to have it.
I would approach it the same way as, for the charter. You're mandated within the agreement for X amount of time to get together and review it. And then hopefully if you're doing it consistently every 5 years, the reviews are, minor at best, from there. I think now with 20 years of it really not being looked at is going to be a lot of work to be done.
Yes.
I think the issue comes that it's really the responsibility of that committee that is adopted under that district agreement to do that kind of process. I hear
Right.
which is why I had recommended maybe a letter as opposed to a resolution or an order, because I don't think it's within the purview of this.
Yeah, and the irony too, this is nothing against the school committee. I don't even think they were aware. I think they looked at us to say, you guys need to, start this, and at your advice, we said, no, you guys have to. So eventually, we should get there.
Yeah.
Any other discussion on this? Well, thank you, Mr. George. Moving to letter B, creation of a review committee that's brought to us by Mr. Fitzgibbons.
I'm really pinch hitting for our chairman, Ms. Loesch, so I'm going to try to do the best I can. We had a discussion at our strategic planning committee meeting at the last one, and I'll also look to Mr. Haley to pinch hit for me if I get something wrong, that we would recommend to the council to consider adding a standing committee into our rules, a standing committee on reviews for council employees. And right now we have two. We have the town manager and we have the council clerk. And the reason for that was that way there would be a focus and a rhythm and a cadence to the reviews, getting a half-year review done, getting a full-year review done, having an ability to stay within the open meeting laws as far as getting opinions and input from everybody on the council. And so that was the idea that, we thought we should bring forward and just see how everyone reacts to it. And then go from there. So that was the discussion, and those, I think, were the salient points, Mr. Haley. I don't know if I missed anything.
Sounds about right to me.
Okay.
Anybody have any input or discussion about that? Mr. Columbotus.
That sounds like a good idea. Anything we can do to improve our review process? I know I'm grossly disappointed in the way in which we fulfilled our responsibility to review the town manager, and there's no aspersion on him. It's just it's our job to manage the manager and review his performance, and we haven't done that. And we're lucky that he's done a good job, but we should have better data to that effect. So hopefully presumably the existence of such a committee would help with that goal. So I'm all for it.
So if folks are agreeable, what I'd do is take any further input here, bring it back to our next strategic planning committee, and we'd try to come up with an order to amend our council rules to say, we're creating another committee. Here's what it is, and any thoughts we may have, and then bring it back for a full discussion, and then I would imagine, go to the Rules and Procedures Committee and go from there.
Actually, if I can,
Yes, Mr. Wood.
In Rules and Procedures, which Aisha is also on that committee, which is good, we've been discussing council rules, so this would be good timing to mesh it all together so that we can have any updates all together.
Okay.
Mr. Columbotus.
One thing I would suggest is that order include a fairly specific charge for that committee, just so it's not,
okay,
so it's clear what your goals are. Thanks.
If I could just ask, so is there not a protocol established for establishing a standing committee as opposed to an ad hoc committee? You characterized it as such, what would be a standing committee?
In our rules,
yes,
in our rules and procedures that are out there on the web and everything, we define certain committees as being committees of the council. So budget and finance, public safety, rules and procedures, etc. And so what the suggestion would be to include a review committee employee
Right.
review committee.
But so
whatever.
is it creating a new
Yes.
standing committee?
Yes, within those rules.
But there's probably a protocol already in the rules as to how that is done, and
It's just an order to amend the rules, essentially. I'll defer to Mr. Wood.
Sure. So the charter allows us to create our own rules on how we govern. So, for example, we use Robert's Rules, Nth edition, whatever we're using, and other things. The charter calls for a handful of standing committees. Within the rules, we have additional standing committees, and there's rules about quorum and rules about, time speaking and the president's, some additional things that aren't specifically laid out in the charter. It is by ordinance, so it would require 6 of us to vote in favor of any changes to the rules. And we are going through a review of those right now to pull them up and update them. So this would be a good place to add. So that's where all the extra items are actually inserted, and in some cases it's clear and plain what the committee is about. In this case, maybe we do want to have language about what the charge of the committee is.
okay. Thank you.
Any other discussion on the
All right.
Review committee?
We'll take that back to the committee and draft.
take it
get
back
something
to
drafted.
strategic planning and
Yes.
draft up a proposal over? Excellent. Thank you for good discussions, folks. Since we're talking about committees, let's move over to committee reports. Anyone? No committee reports.
Can I ask Mr. Fitzgibbons to report on the goals that are sitting in the strategic planning, since that is kind of what spawned our discussion on review and such?
Mr. Haley is the vice chairman, so I'll defer to him.
We'll hear about that next time. Right?
Next time.
We're looking at them and trying to, incorporate.
Right, so
them.
that answers Mr. Columbatus' question about managing the
just-
manager, its goals,
Yeah,
expectations.
we've got to, we're trying to come up with a process that makes sense around
Okay.
the budget, requests, et cetera, and how to measure everything, so.
Right, okay. I can give a brief overview of rules and procedures, since the next item is on there. Ms. Loesch isn't here. She is the chair of Rules and Procedures right now. So the office of the evening hours measure that you see before you has been discussed for a long time. I was a much younger person when I first introduced the concept. And what the town manager has done in the meantime is, instead of directing it toward one office of the building, he's been able to work out an agreement with the collective bargaining agreements that cover that cover the other areas to try to reach an agreement with those structures about having evening hours. And so that's one of the items that we've been talking about. So we've brought it back in front of you with proposed amendments.
Thank you. Okay, now we're at L. Legislation for action. So fiscal order 18-004, evening hours. Speaking of evening hours.
Would you like an overview
if
or
you-
a proposal to?
If you could just do a brief overview, Mr. Wood, that'd be great.
Sure. As I just said, this was born out of a hearing a number of different concerns about not being able to access town offices at convenience hours for people that work. The building is open basically from 8 to 4. You've heard the town clerk makes herself available for other times, but that's not true of other offices within the town hall. Every time we have 4th of July fireworks, it reminds me that we're a small town, but every time we look at the budget, it reminds me that we're a big municipality and continuing to grow. And this is something that many municipalities do. They have extended evening hours once or twice a month or a week to make it convenient for those people that can't make it in early during the day, during the workday. So this was meant to be a convenience for the citizens of Bridgewater, and really nothing more. So I'll make a motion to approve with the intent to amend.
I'll second.
Motion made and seconded to approve and discuss amendments. Any discussion on that motion? Those in
So we don't vote on that yet. I'll make a motion to amend. As you see, we are striking the office of the town clerk and just making town hall as general. We're striking, whereas the office of the town clerk is a customer-facing office of the town clerk, and we're just leaving in, whereas the academy building is open to the public late for meeting of the town council, as is tonight. Whereas there are no standard evening hours and again, striking the office of the town clerk and replacing that with town hall. And striking the next section, which gives us the ability to make this, if it were just for a town clerk. In the therefore, we're striking, again, the section about the town clerk and replacing it with the town hall office hours will be extended to twice monthly on the first and third Tuesdays. In return, the town hall will be closed on Fridays in July and August. And then in the explanation, again, striking the office of the town clerk, replacing with at town hall as the amendment.
discussion on those amendments?
Do we have a second? I made the motion.
Oh,
Okay. So the discussion is, I tend to, when we're looking at Bridgewater, I tend to look at a lot of different towns and cities and see how they do their business. And as I said, even within the Commonwealth, outside the Commonwealth, evening hours are, I think, a good practice, a best practice. People that are looking for access to talk about the tax collection or assessment or something like that don't normally have the ability to come in during a workday if they're working. They obviously have the ability to phone. A lot of things are now online, but the convenience of coming in and talking about an excise tax bill or something else, I think needs to happen outside of just daylight hours. And that was the motivation behind this, to make it convenient for everybody in Bridgewater to have easy access to town hall.
Thank you. Mr. Gallagher?
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. On the amendment, if we are going to vote to open the town hall in the evening, I think it's only fair that not just the town clerk be open, that all departments that service the public be open as the amendment states. However, we did hear earlier from the town clerks stating some reasons why this really isn't necessary or needed in the sense of that no one was really polled about it or asked about this. And in this order, it doesn't say what those hours are. What does late mean? And there's a memo here from the town manager. It seems like he's done a lot of work. Well, I'm not saying you haven't. It certainly shows that a lot of work has been done negotiating with the two unions, but it doesn't really sound like it's firm. It's like we are planning based on your feedback. We're in negotiations. It just sounds like there hasn't been any firm agreement with both the unions that they are on board with it. You can clarify that if I'm wrong. So, I have some issues, and, we have a department head here who's elected, who's able to freely speak her mind and talk to us when she can, and that's a good thing, because we wouldn't know these things otherwise sometimes. So, I know a lot of people do take Fridays off from work. I, in the past, have used that day to do a lot of business, not just personal business, but, personal government business. And it'd just be nice to see the town hall open. I don't know what happened back in the day. It even started before I was even a selectman back in 2002. But I think due to budget cuts, the town got rid of the evening hours when they were open and went to a shorter Friday to save money. Well, the evening hours never came back, but the shorter Fridays stayed. So I don't know if that was ever looked at to extend the Friday hours. So I don't know. I think this needs a little more work. I don't know if we have a firm agreement with all the unions that this is what they really are willing to negotiate. but I do take to light what the town clerk said earlier this evening.
Is there a request for clarification on that?
Yeah, I mean, when the memo, and there's no clear time frame. What does late night mean? I mean, it is 9:30. If the council's meeting, are they going to be open when it says when the council is
So
here?
Mr. Gallagher would like a little clarification on
They
that
stay
statement
until
on a few different
when we
points within
leave,
it.
is that when the town hall closes? When we leave?
We don't have enough money for that. No, I think the intent is, and I don't want to expound upon it too much because you're correct, we haven't finalized the negotiation, sort of pending council decision, but my intent would be to have the offices open at least into the evening hours. I don't know if we can make it to 7:30. It depends on the calculation of all the hours that we have to do, but we would have the offices open, I would say, at least until 6:30, 7.
Mr. Columbotus?
I'm wondering which town offices would be open late. I mean, there's some that don't deal directly with the public, so would they be required to be here late on those days? Or?
That's a great question. Our intent would be to keep the building open and all the offices in the building open. I had a discussion with IT today, just as an example, and in order to support what goes on in the evening hours, we'd need to have an IT presence during those open hours. So all the offices would have a presence.
So full functionality within this building.
Correct.
Mr. Souza?
Yes, I'm trying to understand what you're going to do is you're going to cut people's hours, correct?
No.
How are you going to take Fridays off?
So the increase in hours that would result from being open later in the evenings, because we can't afford to simply pay more money for increased hours, we would compensate those hours by not being open for the 5 hours on Friday that we're currently open during the 2 months in summer.
All right, so the 2 months in the summer, you're going to close on Friday. And when are they going to do these extra hours? How many weeks?
We'd be open the first and third Tuesdays later on the first and third Tuesdays year round.
Year round. So when they're off on their Fridays, that particular week, they're not working the extra hours. How are they going to get paid their full pay? I'm trying to understand the financial part of it, because if you're here for, we know that we close early on Fridays, okay, but there still are a certain number of hours that all the employees are here and getting paid. So now you go through the summer, be it 8 weeks or 10 weeks or whatever, that they're not going to be working on Friday, okay, but they're not going to be working the nights either, are they? They will be working the nights around the calendar. Not just later, as I kind of understood you to say. So it's going to be 52 weeks a year, they're going to be here in the evening.
The first and third Tuesdays of the month.
Of the month.
Right.
Okay, so that's how, so on the first and third Tuesday, they will be making up for the hours that they lost on all those Fridays during the summer.
Right.
So how do we shift July's payroll for these people over to November's hours? So that's when they're working the extra, they're staying open in the evening in December, for an example, but in July and August, they're on reduced hours. How does that financially work out?
It would, well, a snapshot of the year, it would be a wash, because as you point out, the hours, over the course of the year, the hours that they work on the Tuesdays and Thursdays would be made up on those Fridays. But that's a discussion that we'd have, that financial and detailed discussions we'd have to continue to have and have a impact bargaining with the respective units.
Mr. Columbotus.
Mr. Souza's questions make me wonder about, I guess if a new employee comes on in July, they really luck out because they get Fridays off, not having worked Tuesday every other Tuesday night. So how would that work with, I mean, I understand if there's someone here continually throughout the year, but if you have someone, a change, if you get a new hire within a department, then that, it seems like you're going to have some inequity, throughout the calendar year.
Maybe if I can ask a question to help direct the answer to that. For non-department heads, what is the weekly hours that are expected to work?
35.
35.
Average.
35 in a week. So what are department heads expected to work?
40 plus.
40 plus, right. So for the staff that is normally here, weekly, they're expected to work 35 hours. So when you work more than 35 hours in a week, you bank hours. And during the summer, you draw from that bank, and your paycheck evens out for the year because it's a year of 35 hours. It's not a month of 49 and a month of 16. It's a balance of 35 hours throughout the year. That's what the town manager has to work out, is the balance of the Friday hours to the Tuesday hours. Does that make sense?
I'm gonna have to
I don't
say
think that addresses-
I just don't see how it's financially going to average out, not going to work out. I just don't see it.
Well, I think
Maybe
then,
once we get it down in a piece of paper and we have it just outlined, because I don't see how 10 weeks' time, having Fridays off, is going to spread out over 2 Tuesday evenings every single week for 52 weeks.
If I can.
And people are going to go without part of their pay here, but they're going to make it up there. It's kind of like what you're saying.
Mr. Woods?
So we'll clarify the legislative and executive branches and how an order actually works. So we're not ordering staff to work late on Tuesday and take Friday off. That's what it says. What we're ordering here is a town manager to figure out how to make that work. Right? So he's got to go back after we pass this, if we pass this, and figure out how to make that work. If he can't make it work, he's going to come back to us and say, I tried, I can't make it work. He's made a lot of progress in a year and a half. So we can't direct the executive branch other than the town manager through the town manager. So we're saying to the town manager, make this work. And he's indicating that he's done a lot of work for the past year to make this work, and can work out the details and bring the details back to us.
Me?
Yes, Mr. George.
So being part of the discussion for this as well, I think, and I appreciate town clerk's position on this and understand it, and I took a very unscientific approach and just went on a bunch of city and town's websites to look at hours and things like that, and this flexibility. I think ultimately our goal was to try to make it a little bit more flexible for people that just have a very tough time getting to town hall Monday through Friday from 8 to 4. And I've heard numerous times with, since we've moved over here, the loss, I never thought I would hear so much of a loss of a mail slot in my entire life as I do now with people trying to pay their bills and the mail slot, which I understand, and we've talked it through in regards to why we can't have it in the building, but hopefully maybe something down the road. But I think I think to Councilor Wood's point is the mythology around it is we're not going to satisfy everybody, but we have gotten feedback in regards to trying to expand hours within the town. One of the questions came up was a Saturday. I mean, and I don't think from a feasible logistics contractual agreement, we could have town hall open on Saturday. So the next best thing that we came up with was to have some extended hours twice a month to allow people that work out of town, things of that nature, to give them the ability to come in. And I just want this to be clear. This is not a statement that people in town hall don't work hard enough. That is absolutely positively not the case. We're just trying to take the confines of contractual and fiscal and try to open it up a little bit more for people in town to be able to do some more business. And we picked the summer just because in the discussions we had, overall, that Fridays in the summer were probably some of the slowest of Fridays throughout the year. But that's not to say people don't come, which I totally understand, but, you know, this is probably, as we see it right now, the best alternative to try to expand those hours. So that's just my input.
First, I'd just hopefully make a friendly amendment to this amendment and replace Town Hall everywhere with the Academy building, because that's what we're sitting in. We're not sitting across the street.
Yes.
So, if that's okay.
Motion?
That's a motion,
Second.
yes.
Motion made and seconded to change all the references to Town Hall to Academy Building. Want to keep that open?
I'd take a vote on that now, just
Okay,
to close
excellent.
it out.
Those in favor of that amendment?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? There you go. Thank
All
you.
right, continuing on with the amendment as amended. I have to disagree with Mr. Wood about the separation of legislative and executive. It says that the town council be it ordered that town hall office hours will be extended twice monthly on the first and third Tuesdays. In return, town hall will be closed on Fridays in July and August. It's being ordered by us if we vote on this. It's not saying, oh, well, town manager, try to work it out. It's saying, this is what's going to happen. And then the town has to work within the confines of that. So I just disagree on your characterization there, Mr. Wood.
I will accept that.
And then secondly, I'm not a big fan. I'm a fan of kind of the idea in general. I'm not a big fan of the order being twice monthly on the first and third Tuesdays. I would change that to be the office hours will be extended according to regular town council meeting schedule, because we vote that at the end of every year, and it's known at the beginning of each year we're gonna, and I think this year our council clerk can tell us how many times we violated our own rule to change first and third to whatever days work because of school vacations or holidays or various other things. So, and we only meet once in July and August during the summer. So why would anyone be here, on the other Tuesday when we're not even here? And that brings me to my third concern about this is that council doesn't start their meetings until 7:30. I just heard the town manager say, I can't guarantee you'll be open till 7:30. Well, if you're open till 6:30 and I want to come down and transact town business and go say something about having transacted town business at the council meeting, do I have to sit around for an hour? Do I go somewhere? It would make sense to be open till at least the town council starts their meetings. And so I'd suggest this needs a little bit more work, especially from the town manager's side in working with the unions to come back and say, okay, we've heard some input from the town council, and you're only going to have to be there on nights when the town council is there in a regular meeting, and we know that at the beginning of the year, so you've got your schedule, from, what do we do that, in November or December? You've got your schedule for the year, and then, we'll bargain in that, even though you work 40 hours this week, that's because you're going to work 30 hours this week, and we're not going to have to pay you overtime here or, whatever there. You bank the hours, as Mr. Wood said. So I'd like a little bit more of a definitive agreement other than just to say, because once we vote this is happening 30 days from now, whether we have an agreement or not. Supposed to anyway. And, so I'd just like to see some of those changes considered. So I guess at this point, I'd make a motion to table this until our next regular meeting to perhaps flesh out some of these issues a little bit more.
And I would also just weigh in charter-wise relative to this. I think the intentions, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Wood, was access to public and not a direction or order to an employee, which absolutely is not within the purview of the council. So I think it gets dangerously close there because you are directing the town manager to do things to keep it open to the public, absolutely. However, it indirectly affects what his collective bargaining agreement rights are under the charter, in addition to the department heads and what they have to tell their employees they have to do. So I think it's getting very close to a direction by the council relative to an order or telling an employee what they can or cannot do. So I just to weigh in legally, it's getting close.
So bolstering the motion that was just made.
Just to put more emphasis on it, I think Mr. Rollins has to go back and do some more work to understand all the implications of everything. Again, I'm not opposed to the idea. I think it's good to have evening hours to the extent we can do it, and creatively solve it by giving up hours in places where there's less traffic. That's what Uber surge pricing is all about. But I think if we get some more information back to us about what can be agreed to and how this can be crafted in a way to make sense from a legal perspective, from his perspective, but also from what makes sense to the town to keep, allow as much access to as many people as possible. I think that would be important. So that's why I made the motion.
Motion stands. Shopping for a second. Seconded for discussion by Mr. Gallagher.
Was that to postpone to a date certain? I heard table, which would be different. You don't want to table it.
Okay.
You want to postpone it to a date. Okay.
Postpone to YTD, yet to be determined.
Our next meeting.
Postpone to next meeting. So that's the motion seconded by Mr. Gallagher for discussion.
I mean, I agree that it needs more work. Maybe it needs to go back to the Rules and Procedures Committee. Hopefully there'll be at least one meeting before our next meeting, and maybe they can clean it up. But I'm in favor of what Councilor Fitzgibbon said. He made some, all his points were right on. But my question, I guess, through you, Mr. President, to the town council, could the town manager has authority, correct me if I'm wrong, to open and close this building when he wants? Emergencies, snowstorms, things like that.
Yes.
Am I correct? Could he put something in place like this if he chose to?
I actually think it would be more appropriately put in place by the town manager than by the town council.
I'm not advocating for that. I'm just saying it could be done like that.
Which is exactly what I was getting at. I get where Mr. Wood is coming from. I think his intentions were access to the public. Yeah. Which is what this comes under. But I think it's probably more appropriately addressed by the town manager under the charter because it directly impacts his ordering of employees in terms of the time they work, the time they don't work. So yeah, I mean, I think it is within his discretion.
Thank you.
Mr. Wood.
I agree with Mr. Fitzgibbons. We can postpone this till later. I think in the year and a half, we've made a tremendous amount of progress toward this. I think as Mr. George said, what I'd like the town manager to do is to look at how other municipalities have solved this problem, because many have, right? Access to the public is critical. Hopefully, Mr. Rollins, you'll look at it again and maybe, adjust the language a little bit for us so that it doesn't get too close, but
I think it may be a little longer conversation just in that I know that there are currently, and goes way beyond what we should be talking about in a public setting, but there are collective bargaining agreement discussions going on.
Sure.
So I think some of those things maybe almost have to get resolved first before we start addressing some of these other things.
That's fine. And I know those are active and whatnot, but
absolutely.
But the intention of as representatives of the community, we would hope that the access of the community to its resources would be as open as possible. That was the intention. I hope we can get there. I like the idea of putting it pushing it off another meeting so people can go off and do some work.
Mr. Columbotus.
I'd like to offer a friendly amendment to Mr. Fitzgibbon's amendment. Perhaps we should push it off till the first meeting in May and not the meeting.
I'm open to that.
That's fine.
So you want to withdraw? You need to withdraw?
I'll just restate my motion as to, rather than the next meeting, the first meeting in May.
Made and seconded to postpone to the next first meeting in May. And that's still on the table for discussion. Are we done discussing it? Those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Those opposed? Here we go. Thank you for that. One down.
The next two should be easy.
The motions. They postpone with it, right?
Right, so Roberts would say that takes precedence over.
Right, so the rest carry on.
I believe, right? Right? I'm right?
Correct.
I'm always right. Oh, come on.
No, you're not.
In effect, I was right first. Will I be here in May?
Yes. That one meeting.
That's the one. Okay, thank you, everyone, for that discussion. And
On this next item, Mr. President, I don't believe that the finance meeting could meet last night because they did not meet quorum.
are you saying yes, that is correct? So,
So I make a motion to postpone 54 off to our next scheduled meeting.
Second.
How about we take a 1-minute break real quick?
break while the council
Ann had to step out for a
secretaries.
minute, just so we can keep her up to speed. Talks amongst yourselves.
I'll tell you, I don't know what's going on with
You
my
can
back.
make a motion to recess.
Recess for
Quick.
1 minute.
2 minutes.
2 minutes. 2 minute recess. Make a
minutes.
motion to recess.
Second.
Second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you.
President can do that by himself, you know.
Visible damage or. So.
Well, the state board is at 4:30.
Yeah. If I don't have to be home at a certain time, I'll do that. All right.
We back?
Mr. President.
We're back. Yes, recess is now over. We are facing the microphones and carrying on with the meeting, which left us at a motion to postpone.
Second.
FY 19054 has been made and seconded.
And for
I'll
the
say
benefit
discussion,
of the
sake of
benefit of the minutes, it's because I believe the Finance Committee could not meet last night to vote on this measure.
Thank you for that clarification. So those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Thank you. Moving to Resolution FY 19-004. Urging the state legislature to adopt a deposit on little plastic and glass nip bottles. And who's going to read that descriptive? Mr. Columbotus?
This is very simple. We all can see the problem that these small nip bottles pose and litter in our streets and waterways. And so this very simply is urging the state legislature and the governor to take action to amend Mass General Law, Chapter 94, to include these nip bottles in the deposit program.
Thank you for that intro.
Can I ask a question?
Just questions, yes.
Appropriate to ask questions? So at the end, it says single-use water bottles. Is that part of the nip bottles, or is that something else?
Okay, yeah, that was my question. Because
That should not, no, that was not, I'm sorry. So let me offer an amendment to strike the last 5 words of the therefore, put a period after serving.
Point of order, I think we need a motion to approve first.
Okay, let's do that. I make a motion to approve.
I second it.
Motion made and seconded to approve the resolution.
Right, and then a motion to amend by striking the last 5 words
I'll second that.
of the resolution.
Motion made to strike and single-use water bottles, made and seconded.
you're amending it.
Seconded?
Made and seconded, I think Mr. Wood seconded it. So that we can move forward with the vote of the amendment. Those in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay, so that is stricken. Further discussion on the motion to approve?
Mr. President,
Yes, Mr. Souza.
I've seen a number of pictures that people have been taking and putting them on Facebook, and you're talking an awful lot about pint bottles as well. Alcohol bottles, the pint bottles. I mean, if we're asking them to do small alcohol bottles that are getting thrown out the window, I think we should amend this to add them as well. I'd like to make that motion, if I can.
Point of information?
Yes.
Is that inclusive of what's being discussed up at Capitol Hill, or is this specifically for nip bottles? Because I don't...
can't
Not a
speak
point of
for that.
information, but a point from me. I believe it's nip only. From my recollection
Right.
of when we had that discussion several times.
So for Council Souza, I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. I'm saying I think we have to mirror exactly what the legislature is debating right now, but I would be 1,000% with you on all those bottles. As a matter of fact, I'd be 1,000% if the legislature said it was $1 per nip bottle, but that's just me. So
Mr. Fitzgibbons.
Are you done?
yeah, no, I am. I wanted to
No,
make sure
I-
Mr. Souza knew why I was saying that.
I just wanted to make a motion to amend as well here. Well, no, because we're discussing Mr. Souza's motion. Was there a second?
Was that a motion?
To add pint bottles to it is what I look for.
Okay, so the motion, I guess that was made and seconded. Was it seconded? It's not being seconded.
President, I'll just withdraw it anyway. Sorry, I missed it.
Withdrawn.
Based on,
Okay, so Mr. Fitzgibbons.
Oh, I'd just like to make a motion to amend as I review this a little bit more closely. In the second line, to strike the words "and single-use water bottles" as well.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion made and seconded to strike and single-use water bottle. Is that correct?
Yes, in the second line.
In the second line, okay.
Oh, I missed that.
Those in favor of that amendment?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those
Aye.
opposed?
Aye.
Thank you. Second. Main motion still up for discussion. Okay, those in favor of the main motion?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Thank you. That moves us to old business, which there is no old business. We referred all of the remaining ordinances under that section. Moving back to citizens' comments. There are a few left, so please step on up. Name, address, and brief comments. Thank you.
Merrily Kenny Hunt, 80 Austin Street. Thank you for all your hard work tonight. I just want to come back to the thing that I said at the beginning. When you're talking about asking the town manager to do something about open hours and all of that sort of thing, please think of public service. I know that that was your original intent, but anything that takes away from public service, I belong to both the city clerk's listserv of all the city clerks and to the town clerks. I've asked them in a very informal survey, how many of you are open evenings and what kind of attendance do you get? I got back unanimous. Hardly anybody ever comes in at night. We do everything online. So just think about it as it feels that we're straining a bit at a gnat. I'm not sure there's a real problem about not serving our public. And I wish that you would ask the public first instead of us just sitting here in this room. I mean, I interact with them some every day. You interact with them. We're all elected officials of this town, and I believe that we care about serving the people of this town. So why don't we ask the people of this town what they want us to do and then do that, rather than think that one constituent telling you that they couldn't get in at night doesn't mean that there aren't 10 who always could and just miss a drop box. So can we just figure out from them and till we get all the employees all stirred up and everybody trying to figure out hours and when to do a paycheck and all of that sort of stuff? Let's think about what we can do to serve our public the best we can. That's all I'd ask of you.
Thank you. Other citizens for citizen comments? Going once, twice. Thank you. Council comments? Mr. Souza.
I'll pass. No comment.
Mr. Columbotus.
I appreciate having citizens show up today and speak passionately about the schools. To some, interest in the schools might seem like a narrow, special interest, but it really, quality schools really serve everyone's interests, even those without kids in the school. So I hope that's something we all keep in mind as we go forward. Thank you.
Mr. Wood?
I believe in quality schools. I think that when we had the actions before where we devastated the music and art program, really did a lot of harm in the schools. I can't tell you in public how much I paid out of pocket to make sure my kids got art classes and took private music lessons, but it was a lot, right? Almost like a private tuition. Don't want to go there, but on the other hand, I want to make sure that the public is aware that we're not cutting this assessment. In fact, this year we're increasing the assessment again for many, many years in a row. And there's some other actions that I've spoken about before that counterbalance some of the costs that come out of the process. And there's other ideas that we can talk about too. So we do have a budget process. We will work through the budget process and we'll try to be as flexible as possible. As I said today, we want to be fair to all departments, whether it's education, highway, whatever. And we have limited revenue ahead of us. So it's a big challenge and hopefully we can get through it. Thanks.
Mr. Gallagher.
Thank you. Just quickly on that note, those that came out tonight to express their concerns as they have in several meetings in the past, I appreciate that and they're welcome. And as we have stated tonight, the Budget and Finance Committee will begin meeting a lot over the next 45 days before we have to pass the budget. So I encourage them to continue to be vocal and for all the town departments, if they can, to come out to our budget meetings, whether they're televised or not, they'll be in this room. And you can also reach out to me directly for any questions you have at my town email, dgallagher@bridgewaterma.org. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chase.
Thank you, Mr. President. The town election will take place on April 27th. I believe that the town clerk has updated the town website to provide information about absentee ballots, which are now available, and also the final day of voter registration. Obviously, do check the town website for those important details. I think as well, I believe still in the works is another meeting planned in connection with the comprehensive plan for the town. I think that Councilor George has a session scheduled for, do I have the date right? Is it the 20th of April? I would encourage people to attend that to learn much more about the nature of the changes that are proposed in the town charter. Thank you.
Mr. George.
Thank you. So, to reiterate with Councilor Chase, Friday, April 20th, 9 a.m. at the VFW on Orange Street. All are welcome.
Saturday?
Saturday, excuse me, Saturday.
Friday at 9 a.m.
9 in the morning. The only thing, well, there's a couple things I ask is, one, if anyone's going to come, to let me know so I can set up all the tables and whatnot, to have that all done logistically. But the other thing that I'll convey at the meeting, as well as I'll do now, and I'll thank Attorney Rollins for this, is that this is going to be, the intent of this meeting is strictly to go over the specific language in the ballot on the changes. There was a concern, and rightfully so, in regards to the message being delivered by elected officials on something that can directly affect their position. So my intent is to inform, not to influence. That does not mean that we can't have discussion, but I'm going to be very regimented in the fact that the paramount goal of that meeting is to make sure that we cover all the questions and people understand what they're going in to vote on, since it's a pretty lengthy ballot. After that, if we have time, which I'm constrained on time, I'll be more than happy, but that discussion will be for general purposes only. It will not be part of my presentation. So I know it was done a little bit differently in here last time. Mine's going to be different, but I think the intent across the board is just to make sure people are aware of what the changes are. I'll convey this right now, even though I can't attend Budget and Finance Committee meetings. I've spoken to my colleagues. I fully expect our revenue projections to increase. I'll say this as a ongoing recurring theme. $9,331,257. That's our free cash in the last 5 years, on an average over 5 years of $1.9 million. We have gone to the extreme about being too conservative on revenues and falling back on the free cash explanation of funding our reserves. I understand the process of that being done, but it's not fiscally responsible to make that almost our paramount to generate enough free cash for those reserves and yet underfund. And it's not just the district. We underfund the highway department. We underfund the council on aging, the veterans agent, and that's just a few. So what I expect this year is going to be a recurring theme on years to come, because I fully expect other departments that have been woefully underfunded to come back and say, we finally need to be funded to give the support to this town that the town deserves. So this isn't just a one and done, folks. The other thing too is, I think there's been a reference to suggestions on cost-cutting measures in regards to the district. I'm just going to say one term, unfunded mandates. If we sit down and look at all the unfunded mandates of the district, our portion of that pie that they're asking for now, I'm very surprised that they're not asking for more. As a matter of fact, I think they're doing things that we can't do in regards to reserves so that they can fund the programs. The other thing, my understanding for Rainham is that they are going to gift the money if we do not increase our assessment. And they specifically, I'm going to be brutally honest, I was really, really put off to watch Rainham not only say the number, but specifically where it was going. And I sat there and I personally got aggravated, and I'm not going to say at the town, I didn't like that approach, but that's just my personal opinion. But to watch them go through and do chapter and verse on where that's going over to the Rainham side, I think everyone in Bridgewater should be really, really disheartened by that as well. So from that perspective, I know we've got a lot of work going on from there. And I think Council Wooden and Council Gallagher said, for people that can't make the meetings, email the Finance Committee, Town Manager, express exactly what your expectations are. I can't promise anything, but I think with everyone's feedback here over the last few meetings and going forward, I think everyone understands what the mandates and expectations are of us and the Finance Committee as well. Thank you.
Mr. Fitzgibbons.
Yep. So just a couple things to follow up on some of the comments around the budget. We still have a $30+ million OPEB liability sitting out there that we haven't barely touched. That's money we owe to our retirees that has not been funded, that will have to be funded either out of operations or to build up a fund to pay it out. And that's a real and serious and big liability. Every year, obviously the big number is the levy limit and how much that goes up. And every year we increase the levy limit to the 2.5%, as close to that as humanly possible. I think we have about $27 left over by the time Shelley's done working her magic. The town of Rainham, because of the differential between commercial and residential there, they don't even touch going close to increasing their levy limit 2.5% a year, which is how they could generate extra funds within the budget process to be able to afford any gifting or anything further than that. And, to that end, I think that, if we want to be serious about these things around developing new sources of revenue and rebalancing the commercial and residential look around the town, we have to seriously think as a town about turning 18, 28, and 104 into things that look more like 44 and 138 and not residential houses. So I'd look to the comprehensive zoning rewrite to look at those things to help us get there quicker rather than longer. Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate hearing the teachers and the moms and dads tonight, but some of the dads come up. My son's in first grade. I was schooled here, for better or for worse. My daughter graduated several years ago from BR. So it's a unique position, having spent all those years and having my family spend all those years in the school system and seeing some recurring stories and some unique stories and, class counts, teacher counts, arts going away. If every student could have the music. I mean, we had, Tim, maybe you had, Mrs. Bottomley was the music teacher. I mean, I remember music probably more than any other class that I had. I'm a musician today. I've been a musician for 20 years. So it's important. And I don't think any of us, and I know that none of us think that it's not extremely important whether we have kids in the school system or not, or have had. So I really like today. I think I heard it more than usual about the appreciation of what we go through here, because it really is, for some of us, it's a real battle, because, you know, I have kids in the school system, and I'm on the Budget and Finance Committee, and so I have this view that I've never had before when it was in the peanut gallery. Sorry. I'm getting both sides, and sitting with some of the school committee meetings and speaking with the superintendent, I'm getting a lot more information now. Doesn't make it any easier. Sometimes education isn't making things easier. So I appreciate the input, and I appreciate what we're doing. I'm glad that people are starting to work a little bit better and be more aware of the process that we have. I do kind of wish I had a little bit more of insight how it was 5 or 6 plus years ago, before we had the group that we have now. So that's it for schools. One other thing, the Journal of American Medicine, the JAMA, came out with, I think it was today, a study regarding exactly what has been talked about with kids with high levels of depression, high levels of going to doctors and things like that for feelings of depression and anxiety, and even perhaps thoughts of suicide. This is a national increase, not just something that the Bridgewater Rainham school system or the Bridgewater schools. It's nationally. This is being talked about at all levels, and I think there's going to be a lot of outside of the box thinking and changes and discussions that go on, not just within the school systems in the towns, but we're going to see a lot of that. And I think keep your eyes and ears open for ideas, and bring them to the Citizens Open Forum. We do it as representatives of the town, and of course our executive branch will, I'm sure, will be doing that in the school system as well. So I hope we can get some of that information as we go forward, because I can't see this disparaging gap continue. Today is my 10-year anniversary. I'd like to say that made it through that. And then Tom St. Thomas, that does the tin roofs, I almost clobbered him at the Common with my car. So when we talk about pedestrian safety, right here, cutting across from South Street, stop at the light. These folks coming up, they stop at the temporary light, or that little stop first. Gentleman decided that he wasn't going to stop. So I'm in my Jeep looking at, trying not to get sideswiped here at this thing. And the car almost got hit going towards the school. So I'm looking at that guy, trying to avoid it. And immediately there's another crosswalk. And we've heard this discussion before, but it's never quite hit home, and almost literally hit Tom. I'd like to apologize to him. I know he watches. I'm sorry. It was me. I almost hit you. I did roll down the window, but you were clearly in shock with your wife. So pedestrian safety, where are we going to have these crosswalks in the Common, future state? Yes, it's all important, especially to me and Mr. St. Thomas. Move to adjourn. Can I get a
second?
Made and seconded. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you.
Cereal. Big healthy dinner.